Tonight we're learning about a Tampa doctor and his very personal fight with an incurable disease. Dr. Vincent Tadone was forced to become an expert when his daughter was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease. Now, years later, the treatment protocol he developed is giving new hope to patients living with ALS. Our Gina Patishi taking action for your health, looking at how the treatment works. Gina?
Deanna Tadone Gage went on a run almost 8 years ago and noticed that she was having difficulty. Soon after, she learned of the diagnosis that would forever change her life. I spoke to Deanna and her father, who have teamed up to extend her life and help others fight the disease.
I said, you know, we're going to beat this.
The words Dr. Vincent Tadone told his daughter in 2007. Deanna Tadone Gage was an attorney, recently married and starting her life when she found out at 30 years old that she had ALS.
Without my father, I would not be sitting here talking to you today. He also gave me the hope to fuel my positive attitude.
Doctors gave her little hope, but she and her father decided to create their own, and that's how the Deanna protocol was born.
If on one hand we can give the cells energy, stop them from dying, and on the other hand we can neutralize what's killing the cells, we'll be pretty good. We'll be pretty good until they ever find a cure.
That's the heart of the treatment plan. It combines natural substances already found in the body that anyone can buy over the counter. According to Dr. Tadone, the medical substances included in the Deanna protocol are not only beneficial for people diagnosed with ALS, but can help those with traumatic brain injuries and brain tumors.
It started with helping my daughter, but I'm able to give back and help all these other people.
Deanna says although her diagnosis was scary in the beginning, she and her father want to help others win the fight.
I'm here to tell you that there is hope.
Tadone says that there are currently over 2,000 people around the world that have reached out to them about the Deanna protocol. If you would like more information about the free program, or if you're interested in helping the fight against ALS, you can head over to our website, which is abcactionnews.com, and click on the story links section. Live in the studio, Gina Patishi, ABC Action News.
News: getting diagnosed with ALS, commonly known as Lou Gehrig's disease, is sadly still terminal.
But a woman in Tampa Bay is finding a way to defy the odds. Spectrum News anchor Jeff Butera has her story.
Deanna Tadone is sitting next to the man she says saved her life, a man who also happens to be her dad.
Which one do we want to win?
Deanna does not mince words. Without him,
I want to be dead.
I won't mince words either. About 15 years ago, doctors told Deanna to go home and prepare to die. She had ALS, a neurodegenerative disease that weakens your muscles and to most in the medical community will ultimately take your life.
I told her I wasn't going to accept it.
Dad Vince Tadone is also Dr. Tadone, a retired orthopedic surgeon. But when Deanna was diagnosed, he threw himself into neurology, trying to find out what caused his daughter's disease.
We made a covenant. She would be the test case. I would do the research.
I don't think he slept. Maybe an hour here or there. There was non-stop.
And he dreamt big.
And we could eliminate all these diseases, where now all we do is we treat the symptoms and watch the patient progress to death.
Instead, Vince tried to focus on what triggers ALS and what might stunt its progress. I'm not going to bog you down in the medical vocabulary, but Vince believes that giving ALS patients like Deanna a mixture of substances called AAKG and GABA might eliminate their muscle symptoms and help their brains.
And it also improves cognition, and it slows progress of the disease because it keeps cells alive.
He calls his cocktail Deanna's protocol. He says in a test, all 41 patients on the protocol deteriorated slower than the average ALS patient. And Deanna, look at her.
Keep those elbows out.
Doing physical therapy 5 times a week, a trainer coming to her house twice a week. She's more than merely alive. Because of her dad, she'll tell you she's living, and that matters.
I am so blessed. that he is my father has given me and others quality of life.
Jeff Butera, Spectrum News.
Years. In 2007, my daughter Deanna complained of stumbling every time she walked. And she noticed that she saw me coming down a flight of stairs. And she said, "Dad, you came down those stairs. You didn't even look at the stairs." And I said, "Deanna, you don't look at the stairs." She didn't realize that she had to look at the stairs so that she wouldn't lose her balance. I checked her reflexes and they were abnormal. She was an attorney at the time and had just made partner in a local law firm. And one of the things that would happen that really scared me was if she would stumble, she would fall. But she lost the reflex ability to put her hands out to block the fall. So she would hit her head.
So all of this was prior, we're here talking about Deanna, all of this is prior to Deanna's diagnosis of ALS.
Yes.
So these are just the early signs of the early symptomatic observations that were taking place, but no one knew what it was at the time.
Exactly. So we started to bring her around to physicians, and a friend of mine, a neurologist in Tampa, did an EMG study on her, and the test, which basically shows action potentials in muscles, was very indicative of ALS. And he didn't really want to make that diagnosis, and so we went to Johns Hopkins. Yes, she has ALS. We went to the Mayo Clinic. Yes, she has ALS. And they gave her 2 to 5 years to live. Go home, get your affairs in order. And
So I have to interrupt you and ask this question. So here you are, an established physician who've retired from being the head of orthopedics at the hospital. You've worked with all these famous athletes. You've worked with all of these things. And now here you are as a father hearing a diagnosis of your own daughter. I mean, you've got these superpowers in the medical field with all these other people in the world, and now you've got a diagnosis of your daughter, which is something that you had no experience in. I have to imagine that just felt like such a helpless feeling, because here you are, this master of medicine, and now it hits home.
yeah, well, it was daunting. And it was just something that it was almost impossible for me to accept. I had one experience with ALS, and it happened to be just an observational experience where I saw a woman taken out of a wheelchair and put into a chair that extended out from the car, and just watched her total inability to move, and then the chair picked her up and went in the car. And I said to myself, can you imagine? You still have a brain, you can still think, but your body doesn't function. You can't hold anything, you can't walk, you can't even sit up straight.
Being flashbacks of this moment when you hear that your daughter now has ALS.
Absolutely.
You're thinking back to this woman you saw completely debilitated in a van one day.
And I'm saying, is this going to be my daughter? And Deanna and I discussed it, and she says, Dad, I don't want to die. And I said, I don't want you to die. I said, look, if you'll be the test case, I'll do everything I can to research neurodegenerative diseases and see if I can find something that would work in helping you. She said, fine. So this was the covenant. And indeed, almost for 2 years, I injected her with substances. She took oral substances, intravenous substances, and to see if there was anything that might help her. During this period of time, her disease was progressing. I think it was about 2011 when I came across this product, alpha ketogluteric acid, which when I gave it to her, she said, "Dad, I can carry a glass of water without spilling it now." And patients who have ALS have incessant muscle symptoms, twitching, fasciculations, so they're very uncomfortable. And the AKG suppressed those symptoms. She also had severe muscle cramps. And I spoke to her doctor at Johns Hopkins, and he said you can use gabapentin. I researched gabapentin. I saw it was GABA aminobutyric acid, which is the primary inhibitory neurotransmitter. And we put her on that. It was not supposed to be able to pass the blood-brain barrier, but she started taking it. She no longer had the cramps.
Now, I want to add, this is 4 years later. This
Yes.
is 2007 as a diagnosis, and you started work immediately, which is probably one of the most amazing parts I hear of the story, because being familiar with the story, she received the diagnosis and you didn't wait a year, you didn't wait 2 years, you didn't, you jumped into action, like a heroic father would, but you jumped into action to start doing this. But it wasn't for 4 years that you really came across what started working. So 2 to 5 year diagnosis, that's her, you said you used the words, go home and get your affairs in order.
Yes.
She has 2 to 5 years to live. You started doing all of these things, desperately searching for something that would have an impact. And I would argue and say something was having an impact, because she stayed alive all the way through 2011 when you came across some of these things. So her condition, she continued to generate. She continued to have cellular death. She continued to, become more symptomatic and more symptomatic as time played out. But 4 years, she was a patient zero to your research. That time had to seem like an eternity.
Well, it did. And once we started the Diana protocol, which was the combination of AKG and GABA, and let me just say, that's the core Diana protocol. But alpha ketogluteric acid is it's a bipolar acid. It's very strong. And we look for something to neutralize it. And arginine is a bipolar base. And so arginine neutralized it. Plus there was an added benefit to arginine, which was basically it increased energy production in the mitochondria. It also lowered blood sugar and caused vasodilation, which increased blood supply. So the Diana protocol was developed AAKG and GABA. And we started her on that. And I said, this is working for my daughter. Her cognition was improved, her muscle symptoms were suppressed, and the speed with which the disease was progressing was slowed down. And so that was 2011. We had a lot of patients who reported that it helped them also. They stated, I can swallow. I couldn't swallow before. And I don't have the muscle symptoms. Some might say, it didn't really help the muscle symptoms. And I would tell them, okay, stop taking it for a few weeks and let me know how you do.
So I want to add in there, you used the word we had a lot of patients, but you weren't treating anybody.
No.
But my understanding is that because people knew Deanna and they knew her situation, and you'd been networking in this ALS community so deeply, that people saw what was happening with her and they started asking you questions, and what is she doing and what therapeutics are you using on her, and you started sharing this formula with, with people. So you weren't treating patients per se, but you were actually having other people experiment with it and collecting anecdotal support.
Exactly. I was not treating patients. In fact, the desire to get this word out, my family basically started a 501c3 not-for-profit corporation, winningthefight.org. The acronym is WFND, Winning the Fight Against Neurodegenerative Diseases. And this was to go online and have a site that we could direct people to and tell them the story about Deanna. And what happened was, and I tried to promote this to neurologists, and they said, well, this is just anecdotal evidence and we can't accept it. So then we decided to fund a research project at the University of South Florida. And we funded that project on ALS mice. That is, mice that were engineered mutationally to have ALS. And what we found was no other product had ever touched these mice or helped them. It slowed the disease progression, improved their muscle function, and improved their energy production, because they did metabolomic studies on the mice, which basically show what are the products, the catabolic products, breakdown products of energy production. And the mice that were on the DP, it was increased. Well, the people in academia, the neurologists, said to me, you can't transfer mice studies to humans. I said, all right. So to get the word out, we wrote the book, The Deanna Protocol, Hope for ALS and Other Neurodegenerative Diseases. In the book, in the appendix, we document 40 patients who had ALS who took the Deanna Protocol. There is a functional rating scale, ALS-FRS, and usually ALS patients, their function will diminish by 1.5 to 2 points a month. Over a 6-month period, the patients that took the DP diminished by 1 or less a month.